Well, the president of Georgia is now voicing support for Ukraine, tweeting, "We Georgians understand and share the most what the Ukrainian nation is going through." Georgia facing an influx of Russians who have left their home country after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I'm pleased now to be joined by President Salome Zorabishvili from Tbilisi. Thank you for joining us. 2.5 weeks into this war, I just want to start briefly by asking you whether you see any evidence that this will end anytime soon.
Well, I think that from where we are looking at the situation, we are exactly in the same position as you are or our European partners, which is that nobody can really make any speculation about what's going to happen. What we can say is that we are all surprised and admiring the type of resistance that the Ukrainian people are putting in front of this all-out aggression by Russia. And in fact, all possible plans that the leader of Russia could have had beforehand have been called wrong by the resistance of the Ukrainian, by the unity of the European nations, by the unity between Europe and the United States. All of that, including one additional not for him known in advancing, was the Russian population's reaction, which is, if not massive, really new, in fact. So I think that in this war, everything is going in a way that we cannot predict. And so it's very difficult to say when and how it will finish.
Your government has walked a fine line in light of this conflict, opting not to join the West in placing sanctions on Russia. On the other hand, Georgia has formally applied for EU membership 2 years earlier than planned. What's your strategy at this point?
Well, that's not exactly true to say not join the sanctions, because in fact we are part of many of the international sanctions, the financial, the bank sanctions, and Georgia has its own sanctions, which is that we do not have diplomatic relations with Russia, we do not have airlines with Russia, and we have 2 occupied territories, 20% of our territory, which are our main sanctions. So we are in a different situation than most European countries. We have no protection from NATO Article 5. We are really on the front line, but we are very in solidarity with our European partners in all, for instance, in all international organizations where resolutions are taken, we are co-sponsoring. So I think that Georgia is where it should be, and it's very important for us to be there where we should be with our partners, and also to continue with our associated trio, that is Ukraine and Moldova, our path towards European integration. And I think that there is a new situation today in Europe, not only this new unity on sanctions, but also a new perception that something should be done towards these countries that are somewhere in between. They are no longer in the Soviet Union and will never be, but they're not yet in the European Union, and the long path, maybe the feeling is that it has been too long and too bureaucratic. So there are some new ideas. It's not yet a new decision, and that doesn't mean that we will not have to go through the whole reform path, but maybe there will be a new political attitude and opening towards us all.
Right. Well, that remains to be seen, doesn't it? But certainly there seems to be the opportunity for that at the moment.
That's right.
Your country, of course, has a long history with Russia, which culminated in the conflict in 2008. And I want to just play some sound from journalist Natalia Antileva, who has covered both Georgia and Ukraine extensively. This is for the benefit of our viewers. Just have a listen.
There needs to be more effort put into thinking how the West is going to protect its non-NATO allies in the region, countries like Moldova, and Georgia. They need to become much more part of that narrative of Ukraine, because they are the low-hanging fruit. And if it comes to Putin getting any sort of military victory in Ukraine, taking either Kiev or other cities, then it's very likely that it will not be NATO countries, the Baltics, that he will go for next.
How worried are you that Vladimir Putin has his sights on Georgia? And what support do you need from NATO and the West?
Well, first of all, I think that we are all worried in one way of what Putin might do next. And he's using quite a lot of these threats, some psychological, some military, on all countries, including talking about nuclear arms. And Georgia, as Moldova, has to be worried more because we have had the experience and we have our occupied territories. So yes, we need more. That's why we are reiterating our calls towards the European Union, and we're continuing our path towards NATO. One thing is sure is that if the 2008 war against Georgia was aimed at preventing us of continuing our path towards Euro-Atlantic integration, it has not succeeded. I think it won't succeed with Ukraine, and we might see also we can fear, but we can also have hopes that tomorrow's Russia will be a weaker one, one that will be less self-confident that it can do everything by force, and maybe understand that it has to do more by diplomacy.
And there will be many Russians who likely agree with where you are at. Many of those have fled to Georgia, considering it's one of the only countries they can get into. I just want to get a sense from you of numbers, if you will. And we have seen reports of Russians facing discrimination and anti-Russian sentiment, as many fear the Kremlin will use them as leverage. Are Russians welcome where you are?
Well, first of all, the Russians that are coming here are not the pro-Putin Russians, I would say. There are those that are trying to get out of the country to wait and see what and how it will happen. On the other side, I will rise against the idea of ethnic discrimination. First of all, because it has never been the attitude of Georgia, including during the wars that we have had. And it's an argument that is basically used by the Russians usually when they want to move in a country to say, well, their population and their nationals are not defended. So it's a very dangerous argument that I would not use. I think that they are welcome.
Let me just stop you with respect. The reason I bring it up is that there are many reports of this sort of discrimination, sadly, in the country at present. So I guess the question really is just how welcome are Russians in Georgia at present? And do you have a sense of numbers at this point?
I will say, well, there are about, I think, 20,000 that have come still since the conflict. I would not agree with the many reports because I think that it's very factual incidents, and there might be there too some fake news floating around. There are many demonstrations in Georgia in the different restaurants of Ukrainian flags, support to Ukraine, and the fact that people that come, including Russians, have to respect the attitude of the Georgian population towards the Ukraine war. But that does not translate necessarily into incidents, and we are very careful about that. I think the authorities are very responsible and will do everything that is necessary so it doesn't happen.
Very briefly, Georgia's set to host NATO exercises at the end of the month. Are you not concerned that that will be seen as a provocation by Moscow?
Well, I think that if one thing has to change after everything that has happened is this fear that that we all have had, and the West has, the Europeans have had, to consider every step they move as being something that can be taken as a provocation by Moscow. The provocations come from Moscow. The aggression comes from Moscow. We are small countries. We have never had any form of aggression in all our history against Russia, centuries of history. The only thing we have known is 4 invasions from Russia. So I think that we have to stop this narrative.
With that, we thank you for joining us. It's good to have you on. It's very good to get your perspective. Some important issues that we discussed there, and we will have you back. Meantime, stay safe. Thank you.